Hi, I'm Hayden Stone, and I read Chapter 13 of Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm going to start it off with a really impactful quote. It says, "Any Christian who blindly accepts the opinions of the majority and in fear and timidity follows a path of expediency and social approval is a mental and spiritual slave." That was on page 17. And then a really cool artistic photo that I really liked that had some cool ideas in the year 1963, which was the same year the book came out. And then the chapter's topic is the answer to a perplexing question. So in part one, he describes the question, which is how can evil be cast out? And he gives the first option in part one, which is man does everything, which he later describes that that's not something that can be feasible, but he says that a good example of that is the Renaissance and the Age of Reason. He says that it was too optimistic and thought that humans alone were justified to cure evil, but he said the goodness of man overlooked its capacity for evil. And I thought that was kind of interesting because he did say, like, the evils that he was talking about were like selfishness, war, and things like that. But even though he disagreed with a lot of the things, this was one of the up top where it says the cool ideas of inclusion. He thanked the scientists for their findings, even though he disagreed with the Age of Reason and the practices that formed independent from God, which are things like healthcare and a lot of the things that he thanked in there, even though he didn't agree with how they were formed from the Age of Reason and how that formed, like, segregated from God. But I liked the fact that he thanked them. And so then I have another picture of a statue of Martin Luther King Jr., and it says, "Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice that make philanthropy necessary." That was page 25. So in part two, he gave the other answer to the how evil can be cast out. And so he said, with patience, God will redeem the world. So this is the other idea. So the first idea is that humans do everything. The second idea is that God does everything. And just as the first one failed, the second one also fails. So he says the Reformation, which was the time where religious ideas came to be very, very, very impactful. And they said the wickedness of man overlooked his capacity for goodness. And so just saying that since they thought that man was evil and that God was the main thing that could happen, well, the main good part of everything and that could cure evil, they cast aside that man has a capacity for goodness. And that led to the Calvinistic concept, which is the total depravity of man. And they said if a baby was unbaptized and he died, that he would be sent to hell. So it shows the religious hyperculture that formed during the Reformation. And then part two continued. This was kind of like another subsection, is that action must be taken and that prayer isn't the only way to inflict change. If God did what everybody wanted because they did a prayer, he'd be, as Martin Luther King described, a cosmic bellhop, which I thought was really quippy and funny. But prayer helps, but a struggle can't be won only with prayer. And so he said that action must be taken as well as prayer and that both are necessary. And then minds must be trained for peace and nonviolent actions in specific. So it's just as difficult training a mind for peace as it is for war. It takes the same amount of effort, as Martin Luther King Jr. stated. So in part three, he gives the answer for how to answer life's most perplexing question. And it's not just one thing. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship, both between God and man, in tandem. But man must have faith in God and God's will. And then faith in God as a person and trusting his will, you'll be able to free one from sin. So if God wants to help someone, the person must be able to open their minds freely to God, kind of like a door. So God isn't going to open the door because he's a gracious and kind and patient God. And that for God to open the door, that the man has to open the door for God to come in and cleanse him of his sins. So those are kind of the main ideas, and then here are my works cited. So thank you, and I hope you have a good day.